It was one of those nights where sleep doesn't come easy. You know the kind. The air feels heavier than usual, your thoughts don't quiet down, and there's this strange weight pressing against your chest, like the night itself is trying to tell you something. I'd been tossing and turning for hours, my bedsheets tangled around my legs, when I suddenly jolted awake, heart pounding like it was trying to break free from my ribcage. At first, I didn't know what had pulled me out of sleep. There was no noise, no sudden flash of light, no reason I could name. But there was something off, something I couldn't quite explain. It was that feeling, you've probably had it too, when every instinct in your body whispers that you're not alone, that someone or something is watching you, staring, waiting. And I swear to you, it wasn't a dream. It wasn't one of those hazy, half-asleep hallucinations where your mind fills in the blanks with monsters that aren't really there. No. This was different. It felt real. Too real. The kind of real that makes your stomach drop and your throat tighten. The kind that paralyzes you before your brain can even form a thought. The room was drenched in shadows, the kind that twist and stretch in ways they shouldn't. I didn't dare move at first. My eyes were wide open, scanning the dark, trying to find a shape, a figure, a silhouette. Anything that would explain why every hair on my body was standing on end. And still, the feeling persisted, crawling across my skin like ice. You think you know fear. You think watching a horror movie in the safety of your home at 2 p.m. makes you brave? I used to think I was tough too. I used to laugh at ghost stories, roll my eyes at people who swore they'd seen things in the night. But that was before I lived it. Before I found myself lying in bed at 3 a.m. with a primal terror coiling around my spine. I don't say this lightly, but I lost it. I mean, really lost it. I felt it happen. My body just gave up. I was so scared I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even scream. And yeah, I shit myself, literally. I know it's disgusting, embarrassing, whatever. But I promised to tell the truth. And the truth is, I was terrified beyond anything I've ever known. And now I'm going to tell you everything. Not because I want to relive it. I don't. God, I really don't. But because maybe, just maybe, you'll believe me. Maybe you'll understand that some nightmares don't end when you open your eyes, that some things, some entities, they exist outside the reach of logic or reason. They don't care if you believe or not. They don't disappear when you flip on the lights. This started, like all truly horrifying things do, quietly. No warning, no build-up, just the sound of a single clock hand ticking into place. And then it hit 3 a.m. exactly. It didn't begin with anything loud or dramatic. There were no screams in the distance, no thunderclaps, no flickering lights to warn me that something was wrong. No, it started in the most unsettling way possible, quietly, subtly. The kind of strange that creeps in unnoticed, like a shadow slipping under a locked door. I remember going to bed around midnight, exhausted from another long, uneventful day. My body ached with that familiar heaviness that comes after hours of pretending everything is fine. I wasn't looking for dreams or peace. I just wanted to shut the world out, close my eyes, escape. But that night, something felt off. It wasn't just in my head. It was in the air, in the walls, in the silence. The world didn't seem right. That was the first thing. The wind wasn't blowing outside. There were no rustling leaves, no distant howls, no signs of life beyond my window. Yet my bedroom curtains, usually still and heavy, were swaying gently, as if brushed by invisible hands. Not violently, not enough to scare me yet, but enough to catch my attention, enough to make my breath hitch. I glanced at the clock on my wall. A simple thing, analog. It had always worked, never failed. But now its hands were frozen, locked in time. 2:59 a.m., not a second more, not a second less. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again, still 2:59. No ticking, no movement, just stillness. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel natural, that feels forced. I reached for my phone, hoping for some sort of grounding. Maybe a notification, maybe just the comforting glow of the screen. It lit up in my hand, pulsing faintly. But there was nothing there. No messages, no missed calls, no updates. Just an eerie, quiet flashing like it was trying to show me something, or warn me. That was when I felt it. A chill, so sharp and sudden, ran down my spine like a blade of ice. But this wasn't the kind of cold you feel when the window's left open or when your blanket slips to the floor. No. This cold came from somewhere deeper. It didn't touch my skin. It clawed at something far beneath it. It felt like something had brushed against my soul, like fingers grazing the inside of my spirit. Every hair on my body stood up as if something unseen had passed right through me. I sat there, frozen. My breath shallow, my heart thudding slow and heavy in my chest. Something was wrong. Not in a way I could name, not in a way I could see, but I could feel it. Every instinct in my body screamed that something had shifted, that I wasn't alone, that whatever had caused the clock to stop and the curtains to move wasn't done yet. The night had taken on a different weight, and deep down I absolutely knew that something had crossed over into my world. Something that didn't belong. Something that had been waiting. And it had chosen this moment to make itself known. And so, at 2:59 a.m., suspended in that frozen minute, I found myself on the edge of something I couldn't explain, something ancient, something cold, something real. I was just beginning to drift off, that delicate moment between wakefulness and sleep, when your mind starts to lose its grip on the real world and begins to fall into something softer, hazier. My body had already started to relax, and I remember thinking finally I might get some rest. But then, I heard it. A sound. Soft. Barely there, but unmistakable. A tapping coming from the wall right next to my bed. It was so faint at first that I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was nothing, maybe the neighbors, old pipes, a settling house. That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple, because the sound wasn't random. It came in a rhythm. Steady, deliberate, tap, tap, tap. Like something was knocking, not with their knuckles but with fingernails, long ones, slow, sharp taps that scraped ever so slightly at the surface between us. It wasn't frantic or rushed, it was patient, intentional, as though it was trying to get my attention, or worse, trying to come through. For a moment I just lay there in the dark, completely still. I didn't move a muscle, I didn't even breathe. I listened, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might drown out the sound itself. But no, I could still hear it. Tap, tap, tap. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket, but it wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that pushes into your ears and presses down on your chest. The kind that doesn't feel empty, but full. With something you can't see, something you don't understand. That silence, it roared inside my head, echoing louder than the tapping ever had. Every second that passed without sound only made it worse. I felt like I was holding my breath underwater, waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. But nothing came. The quiet was unbearable, because it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. I didn't dare move, not even to shift the blanket over me or turn to check the time again. My body was frozen in place, not from cold, but from something older, more primal. Fear. The kind of fear that doesn't come from logic but from instinct. The kind your ancestors must have felt when something rustled in the woods just beyond the firelight. I knew something had changed in the room. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the very air had shifted. The silence stretched on, thick and unnatural. And in that oppressive stillness, my imagination began to fill in the gaps. I pictured long fingers, impossibly thin, dragging themselves along the other side of the wall, testing it for weaknesses. I could almost hear breath, slow, ragged, coming from the other side, like whatever it was had stopped knocking and was now listening, waiting for me to respond. I pressed my lips together, clenching my teeth to stop them from chattering. The urge to scream was building in my throat, but I couldn't let it out. I didn't want to break the silence. Somehow, I felt like if I made a sound, even the smallest one, it would know, it would hear me, and then it would come. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had no meaning in that moment. I was just there, lying on my side, staring at the wall where the tapping had come from, wondering if I'd survive the night. I told myself over and over again that I was being ridiculous, that this was all in my head, that people hear strange things in the dark all the time. But my body didn't believe me. My body knew something was wrong. Then, just when I started to think maybe it was over, maybe I could roll over and pretend to sleep, I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't tapping. It was whispering. So faint I almost missed it, like the wind through dead leaves. It didn't come from the wall this time, it came from the corner of the room. The darkest part, the one place where the light from the street lamp outside didn't reach. I couldn't make out words, just soft, indecipherable murmurs. But they were there, whispering just below the threshold of understanding, as if they were meant only for my soul to hear. I squeezed my eyes shut. That made it worse. I could feel it now. Not see it, but feel it. A presence, cold and watching, as if something had stepped through the veil of the world and was now standing in the same space as me, breathing the same air, sharing my darkness. I wanted to cry, not from sadness, but from the unbearable weight of the moment. The tension in the room was a pressure cooker, and I was seconds away from bursting. My hands gripped the bedsheet so tightly my knuckles ached. I kept thinking, don't open your eyes, don't look, don't see it. But of course I did. I opened my eyes, and at first I didn't see anything. Just my room as it always looked at night, dim, quiet, ordinary. But then, my gaze drifted toward the corner. That cursed corner where the shadows seemed deeper than they should be. And I saw it, not clearly. Not fully, just the suggestion of something, a shape, a figure. So still it could have been mistaken for a trick of the light, but it wasn't, because the moment I saw it, it moved. Only slightly. A shift. A tilt of the head, maybe, but enough to confirm it was real. I couldn't scream. My voice was caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat, refusing to surface. All I could do was stare. My eyes burned, refusing to blink, terrified that if I looked away, it would come closer. That it would take the chance to move freely. And then it did something I'll never forget. Something that made my blood turn to ice. It took a step forward, not loud, not dramatic, just one step. But the floorboard beneath it creaked. It was real. It had weight. It wasn't a shadow or a dream or a hallucination born of fear and sleeplessness. Whatever it was here, in my room, with me. I pulled the blanket over my head like a terrified child, as if that thin fabric could shield me from whatever horror had entered my world. I knew it was stupid, but I didn't know what else to do. I stayed like that, curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably, trying not to breathe too loudly, begging whatever it was to leave me alone. I must have stayed like that for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, the creaking stopped. The whispers faded. The room fell still again. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I lay there for hours, trapped in my own body, listening to the silence, listening for a return, praying it wouldn't come back. And when the first rays of sunlight finally slipped through the window, I didn't feel relief, only exhaustion, dread, and one overwhelming certainty. Whatever had come to my room that night hadn't just passed through. It had found me. That was the moment I knew, without a doubt, I was not alone. It wasn't a guess or a suspicion or some vague feeling that might fade if I just rolled over and pulled the covers tighter. No, it was more than that. It was a certainty that gripped every nerve in my body and refused to let go. Something or someone was inside the room with me. I hadn't heard anything. No creaking door, no footsteps, no breath that wasn't my own. I hadn't seen a shadow slip in while my eyes were closed. There was no warning, and yet I could feel it. The change was immediate and undeniable. The air itself thickened like I was breathing through syrup. My chest tightened, and every breath I took felt colder, heavier, like I was pulling ice into my lungs. The temperature dropped, not just a little, but enough to make my skin prickle with goosebumps and my teeth press tightly together. And then came the smell. It hit me all at once. A stench so foul it turned my stomach before I even had time to register it. It was the unmistakable reek of rot, of something dead and long past decay. The odor clung to everything, wrapped itself around the room like smoke, seeping into the blankets, into my skin, into my very breath. It was suffocating, overwhelming. I wanted to gag, to scream, to run, but I was frozen. Every instinct screamed at me not to move, not to look, but I couldn't help it. Slowly, so slowly, I felt each second stretch into eternity. I turned my head toward the door. My heart pounded in my ears, louder with every fraction of a turn, like a drum leading me toward something I didn't want to see. My vision was still adjusting to the dark, still trying to make sense of the shadows. And then I saw it. I swear on everything I hold sacred, on my life, on my soul. There was something standing there. Not a trick of the light, not a shadow cast by a coat rack or a misplaced chair. No, this was real. This thing had form, a shape. A presence that pushed against the edges of the room like it didn't quite belong in our world. It wasn't moving. It just stood there, completely still, like it had been waiting for me to look. It was a silhouette, black as night, darker than anything else in the room, as if it absorbed light rather than reflected it. It had no face that I could make out, but there was something unmistakable staring back at me. Eyes. Two glowing, blood-red eyes that burned like coals in the dark. They weren't blinking. They didn't flinch. They didn't move. They were fixed entirely on me, locked in place, watching my every breath, my every twitch, my every terrified heartbeat. And the worst part? Those eyes weren't curious. They weren't questioning. They were knowing. Like whatever was behind them already understood everything about me. My fears, my secrets, my weakness. Time stopped. My thoughts scattered into static. There was no logic, no plan, no instinct left. Just the crushing realization that whatever stood there wasn't human. It didn't belong to any world I understood. And yet it was there, in my room, watching me, waiting. In that moment, paralyzed by fear, lying helpless in my own bed, staring into those burning red eyes, I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me when I was just a kid. It was one of those strange, old-world things she'd whisper in a low, serious voice, the kind of thing that scared me more because she believed it, not because I understood it. I could hear her now, clear as if she were right there beside me. Her voice low and firm, like she was passing on some secret truth the world had forgotten. "At 3 in the morning, she would say, leaning in close, her eyes darker than usual. "The gates of hell open, and the things that live in the shadows are free to cross into our world." Back then, I always thought it was just a creepy bedtime story, one of those tales meant to keep kids from sneaking out of bed or staying up too late, just superstition, just myth. But in that instant, locked in a staring match with something that couldn't possibly be human, I realized she had never been joking. It wasn't a story. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a warning, and now it was too late. Because the figure didn't just stand there anymore. It began to move, but not like a person would. It didn't take steps, didn't shift its weight or lift its feet. It glided effortlessly, as if gravity didn't apply to it, as if it weren't truly part of this world at all. It floated across the floor in one slow, horrifying motion, drawing closer with each breath I didn't dare take. And with that movement came a sound, if you could even call it that. It wasn't a growl or a voice or a breath. It was something other. A twisted, guttural murmur that hovered somewhere between a moan and a whisper. A sound soaked in agony and malice. It scraped against my bones, not my ears. A sound that didn't travel through the room, but through me. And then I heard it speak. Not in the way we speak to one another, not with warmth or inflection. It was a voice that had no place in this reality, distorted, broken, echoing with 1,000 other voices just beneath it, all layered and writhing together like a swarm of dying insects. And it whispered, "You called me." My blood ran cold. I didn't understand. What did it mean? I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't summoned anything. I hadn't touched a Ouija board or read from some cursed book. I had done nothing. And yet, it was here. And it knew me. I swear to you, it said my name. Not in the way a stranger might try to guess it, not like it had overheard someone else say it. No, this thing knew me. It spoke my name the way only someone who's known you your whole life might say it. Familiar, intimate, chilling. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. My limbs were dead weight, my throat clenched tight, and all I could do was stare as it hovered closer and closer, still whispering things I couldn't understand, speaking in a language that felt older than language itself. But even though I couldn't understand the words, the intent was clear. This thing, this entity, it wasn't just passing through. It had come with purpose, with reason, and that reason was me. There are moments in life that split you down the middle, before and after. Moments where you know, deep in your bones, that whatever comes next, you'll never be the same. That night, that moment, was one of them. I lay there, paralyzed, trapped beneath my blanket, as if it could shield me from the impossible thing standing only a few feet away. My eyes were locked on its burning red gaze, eyes so vivid, so consuming, they seemed to sear straight into my soul. And in that overwhelming silence, as fear held me hostage in my own body, something surfaced from the depths of my memory. It was a voice. A memory, really. But it felt alive, echoing inside me like a whisper from a forgotten corner of time. My grandmother's voice. I must have been no older than 7 or 8 the first time she said it, her wrinkled hands gently folding my blankets as she tucked me in, her face close to mine, lit by the flickering orange glow of a bedside lamp that always made her eyes look darker, more serious than usual. "Remember, child," she had whispered in that low, almost reverent tone, the one she saved only for truths too old and too dangerous to speak loudly. "At 3 in the morning, The gates of hell open wide, and the things that dwell in the dark are free to roam. Back then, it had scared me, but only in the way scary stories do when you're little. A thrill, a goosebump. Nothing that followed you into the daylight. I'd chalked it up to superstition, to old folklore born from too many stories and too little science. It was one of those sayings passed down through generations, like warnings against mirrors at night or black cats crossing your path. Harmless nonsense. That's what I told myself. But lying there, staring into those glowing ancient eyes that refused to blink, refused to look away, I realized with chilling certainty, it hadn't been a story. It had been a warning, one I'd ignored. And now there was no more pretending, no more rationalizing. It was too late for that. The door had opened, whether I wanted it to or not, and something had stepped through. I wish I could tell you it moved like a person, that there was something familiar in its stride, something human I could hold on to and explain away. But there was nothing familiar about the way it approached. It didn't walk. It didn't even float in a way that seemed natural. It glided, silently, as if the rules of this world no longer applied to it, like it had peeled itself out of some other realm where time and matter didn't function the same. It crossed the room like smoke curling under a door, smooth and terrifyingly calm. And as it moved, it brought a sound with it, a noise I still struggled to describe. It wasn't a voice, not really. It wasn't a growl or a breath either. It was a distortion. A corrupted, wounded frequency that seemed to hum between this world and the next. It was soaked in something ancient, something broken. It felt like listening to grief itself, something hollow and endless. It slithered into my ears and sank deep into my chest, coiling in my lungs. I felt it more than heard it. It wasn't just in the room, it was inside me. Then, somehow, despite everything in me screaming that this was beyond comprehension, beyond language, I heard it speak. The words came warped, layered with voices that weren't its own, like 1,000 whispers overlapping in chaotic harmony, male, female, child, ancient, a choir of pain, of fury, of time itself unraveling. And beneath it all, one voice rose just clear enough to understand, low and cold and terrifyingly calm. "You called me?" My stomach dropped. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I didn't understand. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't lit a candle, drawn a symbol, said a name. I had done nothing. But this thing, this impossible, horrific presence, spoke as if it had been summoned, as if I had invited it. And somehow it knew me, not in the way a stranger might recognize a familiar face, not in the accidental brush of a memory. It knew me in the way no one should. It spoke my name, not hesitantly, not awkwardly, not guessed. It said it with intimacy, precision, like it had said my name 1,000 times before, like it had been waiting to say it again. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My limbs were leaden, my muscles unresponsive. Panic screamed in my brain, begging me to run, to fight, to do something. But my body had shut down, and I was a prisoner in my own skin. My vision blurred at the edges, as if the air itself was warping around the thing in front of me. And all the while it kept speaking, not in words I could understand anymore, but in that same twisted, ancient language. Sounds that shouldn't exist. Words not meant for human ears. They filled the room like smoke, like poison. They wormed their way into my head, and I felt them sink deep, not into thought, but into something older, instinct, soul. Whatever we have inside us that existed before language, it understood. I didn't need to understand the words to know what they meant. This thing hadn't wandered into my room by accident. It had come for me, not just to pass through, not just to scare, but for me. as if some thread had been pulled in the universe and I was the reason it had unraveled. It didn't care about my fear. It didn't care that I hadn't meant to open anything, to invite anything. It was here, and I was the reason why. And even worse, it had been waiting a long, long time. It wasn't just the physical presence of the thing that terrified me. No. What unsettled me most, what broke the last threads of my sanity, was the way it began to take root inside me. It didn't stay on the outside. It didn't keep to the shadows of the room or the corners of the ceiling like some passive specter. This was something else entirely. It crossed a threshold far deeper than walls or skin. It reached into my mind. At first, I thought the pounding in my head was just the echo of fear, the kind that builds when your body is overwhelmed and has nowhere to run. But then came the voices. Whispers at first. So quiet, so distant I could almost dismiss them as figments of stress, maybe even the remnants of a half-forgotten dream. But they grew louder, sharper, more distinct. And then I knew they weren't mine. I was hearing thoughts that didn't belong to me. Memories that weren't mine flickered through my mind like static through a broken screen. Faces I had never seen. Rooms I had never entered. Pain I had never felt. But now I did. As if I was being forced to relive traumas that didn't originate in my life. They bled into me, saturating my own thoughts until I couldn't tell what was real and what was being given to me. And then the screaming began. Not from outside, not from the room, from within. A chorus of tortured cries rising like a tidal wave behind my eyes. Desperate voices, angry voices, lost voices. Men, women, children, so many different tones, all shouting at once, all begging, pleading, crying for release. Help me, don't leave me here, please, please. Oh God, no. Words tangled in agony, repeated like broken records, looping inside my head until my skull felt like it would crack open. I could feel their terror. I could taste it. And it wasn't imagined. It was real. Too real. As if each voice carried a piece of someone who had come before me. People who had stood where I stood now. People who had looked into those same red eyes and felt that same unbearable cold creeping into their souls. People who hadn't escaped. They were trapped, still alive in some twisted way, but bound, consumed. And now their pain echoed through me as if I were next in line. Because I was. That thing, that entity. It wasn't here to scare me. It wasn't haunting me out of some mindless malice. It had purpose. It had hunger. And it had done this before. What I felt wasn't the randomness of chaos. It was practiced, deliberate, like a predator that had perfected its method. It had taken others, countless others, broken them, absorbed them, and now they were part of it, crying out from within, desperately trying to warn the next victim. Me. It wanted me too. Not just my body, not just my fear, but everything, my thoughts, my memories, my soul, whatever I was, it wanted to hollow me out and add my voice to the screaming ones echoing in the dark. And deep inside, I felt something start to slip. A part of me, something fragile and small, beginning to crack beneath the weight of it all. I was losing myself. Thought by thought, piece by piece. And the worst part, it felt inevitable.